Warehouses don't usually trend. The loading docks, the yard space, the clear height specs, one could say it's the least glamorous corner of commercial real estate. And for decades, it stayed almost invisible to the outside world. But today's guest on the Smart Agency Presents GlobeSt Women of Influence podcast has turned all that around. Aviva Sonenreich is managing broker of the Warehouse Hotline, a family-owned, industrial-focused brokerage that's worked in the Denver market since 1984. She is also the host of the Commercial Real Estate's Secrets podcast, and she's built an audience of more than 1 million followers. She's become one of the most recognized voices in the industry by making industrial real estate something people really want to understand. Now, the Warehouse Hotline is a third-generation family business. It traces back to a single industrial building that her grandfather bought in Denver in 1984. And today, Aviva leads the company alongside her father and brother, where she handles warehouse leasing, sales, acquisitions, tenant rep, and property management throughout Colorado. Now, she's a 2026 CREI Woman of Influence honoree, a multi-year award winner as a top voice in CRE media, and importantly, a speaker at the upcoming GlobeSt Women of Influence conference, which is why we get to have her here today. We are so honored to welcome the great, the brilliant Miss Aviva Sonenreich.
Thank you, Jen. I'm very excited to be here, very excited to be a part of the Women of Influence podcast, event, etc. So I'm excited to chat today.
We're so happy to have you. We feel, I have to say, we were just really excited when we heard that we got to have you as a guest, because you have built such a following and such a presence, and you have a lot to offer. And I do want to remind everyone listening that Aviva is going to be speaking on stage at GlobeSt Women of Influence, which is in Denver, July 13th and 14th. You must attend. You must get your tickets. We highly encourage it. And today we're going to just dive into a little bit of behind the scenes to let Aviva tell us some of what we're going to hear about. So, Aviva, I want to start with really the market that you know better than anyone. Let's look at Denver. And your own reporting at Warehouse Hotline describes the Denver industrial market as in a reset. It's not a collapse. Now, there are some metrics and data we need to look at. And the vacancies climbed up to 9.3%, which is about a 2-decade high. Asking rent growth has turned negative. It's down about 2.3%. And so we're looking at tenants who have leverage like they haven't had in a long time. But what we're seeing in your data is that this is not a uniform picture. Yes, there are 70% of submarkets that are seeing demand contract, and yet the buildings that were delivered in the last 2 years still posted about 2 million square feet of positive net absorption. But then you're seeing like pre-1980 product that's giving back 1.7 million. So what I'm asking for you, Aviva, is what's your honest read on where Denver industrial is right now? And when you're looking across all the deals you guys are working on, what is separating the movement and the momentum where buildings are really leasing from the ones that are sitting?
You know, I think people turn on the news or they read about commercial real estate and they expect it to be it's very black or white, right? You're either rich and you're making all the money and, va, va, boom. Or it's like office is dead, retail is dead. We're all like, this is, a sinking ship. And as much as I want to play into that, it's not reality. Denver has a really interesting, I find it to be interesting story when it comes to its industrial product. And that's because in 2012, we were the first state to recreationally legalize cannabis. So overnight, we saw a massive supply and demand modification. But that wasn't it. That's just genesis of we'll say, of recent years. What followed up the legalization of recreational cannabis, which essentially 25% of all warehouse space in the Denver metro area was absorbed overnight as a result, that was followed up by e-commerce, right? So societally, all of a sudden, people are starting to shop online. And then, boom, 2020, pandemic. The people who hadn't been shopping online started shopping online. We like to say that the pandemic pushed industrial real estate 10 or 20 years into the future. So it was very much this series of events that created mania in our markets. Okay, so landlords had the upper hand. We're setting records for rental rates and vacancy lows, and everybody who owns a warehouse in Denver is an all-star, and they still are. However, they really felt like all-stars a few years ago. But what goes up must come down, and it's not down to pre-COVID. It's not down to it's down to pre-COVID. It's not down to pre-cannabis. It's not down to pre-e-commerce, but if any asset can surge 30% in a year, you can expect it to also come down 30% in the same amount of time. And that's what we're seeing. The market peaked out in 2022 with interest rates and free money and yada, yada, and all of it to say today, 2026, I like to say is now the hangover. And the question you asked was, what's the difference between deals getting done today and deals that aren't getting done? And it's easy. It's price. The reality is that deals that are priced here on Earth, in reality, are transacting. I literally closed on a building today that was priced well, and it sold. Thank you.
Congrats. It's a big deal. Still, yeah.
And the same goes for rent, right? We have signed 37 leases so far this year. And what we have seen in the 37 leases that we have signed is that the tenants more than ever are getting crushed in every direction when it comes to pricing, property taxes soaring, insurance soaring, costs of goods and supplies and tariffs and this and that and labor, and all these small businesses are getting crushed in every direction from a price standpoint, where if you buy a property well, you can adjust the rental rate to either be competitive or accommodate the reality of the competition of the other buildings. And so that was all a fancy way of saying, if you can price your property correctly on a sale or lease basis, you can still get a deal done all day long. But if you're using your valuations from 2022, 2023, 2024, you're going to have a bad day. You're going to waste a lot of time.
I think that you bring up a really good point when you talk about the tenants getting crushed. And it's always struck me how commercial real estate really touches all parts of the economy. And so it strikes me in what you're saying that like now is a time to be reasonable is what I would say, because it seems to me like if you, I told my team this recently. I heard someone say once, if you try to hold sand in your hand, right? Like if you hold it really tight, like you just go into a tight fist, then the sand's going to all fall through your fingers and you're going to lose it all. But if you can hold it lightly, then you can keep a whole handful of sand. And I think that's what it sounds like you're saying to those who are investing in industrial or who are owning an industrial, to say, look, there's got to be a reasonable approach to this that takes into consideration where tenants are and what's happening. And then there is still value. And then what I hear when you tell me like, hey, 2022 is the peak and now it's a reset. We're moving away. What I can't understand is, in other sectors, when property goes down, that's when investors want in. So where's the investor appetite right now? Are people thinking like the deals are coming? Like what's happening on that side?
Sure. It's what we call buying season, and it is happening. We are seeing tremendous amount of capital coming from the big fancy office towers in the East Coast, deploying money into Colorado for industrial product, be it iOS, small bay, A-class product, you name it. So there are buyers. Where we're seeing the discrepancy is what we call the bid-ask gap. Commercial real estate is a math problem. This is not emotional. This is business. And it all comes down to the numbers. And if the numbers don't make sense, there's no deal to be had. This is the biggest purchase of most people's lives. And if it's not an individual buyer and it's an institutional buyer, this is what these people do for a living. There's no fooling anyone when it comes to transacting millions of dollars. Sure, people get through the cracks. But the reality is that if the deal doesn't pencil, it's not going to trade. So yes, there are deals to be had. You hear the 3 Ds people sell: death, divorce, disease. And then I'm seeing, the other folks who are selling are finding their way into criminal activity, and they have to sell.
No,
These are the people.
Pepper. It's a spicy environment, Aviva. That's very spicy.
Well, because people don't really sell a lot of warehouses if they're doing well. If you have a well-stabilized building, the tenants pay all the triple net expenses. Ideally, your rental income is decent. Like, there's actually not a compelling reason to sell. It's when there is a compelling reason. Somebody died. Somebody's sick. Somebody's in trouble. That's when we see motion, and that's where the opportunity lies for the buyers.
Interesting. What a storied way of explaining it. Because you're right. It's and you spoke to it first. It's all business, baby. It's all the numbers. It's whether or not the numbers are going to work as to what really makes the deal. And yet it touches so many factors as far as how people's lives are changing. So I assume that you guys have been through various cycles in the Denver market, being someone who's owned property there since 1984. Where are we in that cycle right now? I mean, I know we're in this reset, but are you expecting a big run up this year, next year? Like, what do you envision? I'm asking you like a from the stage question before we get into the next one. What do you see ahead, Aviva?
If I had the crystal ball, I would be in the Cayman Islands right now, but I don't.
Yes! Can I go with you, please?
Yes. I just have to find the ball. I just have to find the crystal ball. I think it got lost when we moved. So, look, I think slow and steady growth, right? We want foundations of concrete, not sand, to bring sand back into this. And I think that, do I foresee a sudden spike in pricing? No. Do I see another gradual? I'm going to take a step back and come forward, and I'm going to say slow and steady growth based in reality. We have not been based in reality in Denver since the legalization. That's why I bring that story up, because overnight everybody became an all-star. And again, if everybody becomes an all-star overnight, that means they can lose that status overnight. And we didn't lose it overnight, but we lost it because now, nationally, we were the bachelor party capital of the country. Like, everybody was coming here to have their bachelor party so they could smoke. And now we're not those people anymore. And that, that's okay. But our real estate is going to follow suit. Now, another interesting facet that we haven't brought up. When you are driving to the airport or driving along one of our many great highways, you're going to see these beautiful new buildings, beautiful warehouses, huge, the Amazon warehouses, the Tesla facilities, etc. These 1 million square foot warehouses were not a thing 10, 15 years ago. These are a new thing societally. What was industrial product pre-e-commerce, pre the last 10, 15 years was C-class warehouses. So these are not as beautiful warehouses. These are more run down. It's not to say they're not gorgeous. They're gorgeous to me, but it's a different type of product and it's smaller spaces. So we are not building C-class warehouses right now, societally, nationally. Why? Because the cost to buy them is more expensive than it is to build. It's called replacement cost. We cannot justify the price to build C-class industrial real estate. So the only thing that we're really seeing developers building right now is A-class, these massive Amazon warehouse facilities. So talk about supply and demand. The supply of C-class warehouses, because it doesn't make sense to continue to build them financially, it's supply constrained and for the smaller tenants. Whereas these big A-class warehouses where the smallest size unit you can get is 20,000 square feet, right? That only plays to a certain demographic of tenant. Well, they overbuilt them in 2021, 2022. It's not overbuilt forever, but present time, they overbuilt these A-class warehouses. So we see a lot of vacancy in the A-class product. And then the C-class product, because of the supply and demand issues, is lower. However, we're at decade-long highs. Now, okay, vacancy's at 9%. Well, we came from a world where vacancy was like 2-3% around the pandemic, right? At post-legalization, pandemic, we were at vacancy of 2-3%. It's nothing. So all of a sudden, 9% seems like the craziest thing because it's 3 times the vacancy rate. But then when I feel bad for myself because we've got 9% vacancy, I go look at statistics and I see that office vacancy is 50%, and that's normal. And then I feel better about myself. So
comparative is always the way to go. We're in a business of comps. You know what I mean? And we can look at like comps or we can look at other comps. I think that's a wise way to look at it.
Yeah.
Well, and there are other segments. I mean, I would say, Aviva, because you did say we were on top of the game, we were the kings of the world, and then we're not. But equally, it's not that you're not. It's just that mania set in and it moved everything around. But I think that there's proof in the value in the fact that there was a run up, that is necessary. And where we've seen another run up, I'd say nationally, is in the IOS, the industrial outdoor storage area. And that's a segment where you've been very vocal and it's on a lot of people's minds. So I know at Warehouse Hotline, you guys recently brokered the sale of an iOS property that was in Commerce City. It was a 1.88 acre site. It had a maintenance building, heavy outside storage zoning, hydraulic lifts, a usable yard space. And you talked a little bit earlier about replacement cost, and you've been quoted saying that iOS is actually one of the hardest asset types to replace, and it's because of zoning and land constraints that are making these sites really impossible. So can you walk us through, especially with such high interest around this, what makes an iOS property valuable to an operator? Is it the yard? Is it the zoning, the maintenance infrastructure? And then if someone's trying to evaluate that, what's truly functional and then what's not? What should they avoid?
Wow, that's a good question. Okay, so we talked about becoming an e-commerce society. We've become a society that we rely on logistics, right? Because suddenly our expectations are that you can click a button and it's delivered to your door in 2 hours. So suddenly we're in this logistics forward world. Now, the cities and counties don't want to comply with the reality that we need more logistics infrastructure. Why? Because we need more logistics, because this is our societal expectation and it's not going to change and it's not going to go backwards. But the issue is that these industrial facilities, these heavy industrial facilities, are ugly. They're an eyesore. So the cities and counties, they want pretty Cherry Creek. But the reality is we can't have pretty Cherry Creek everywhere. And pretty Cherry Creek doesn't bring our warehouse product to us. So the cities and counties are hammering down on industrial zoning, trying to eliminate it left and right. And I know there's another element of like they get higher tax revenue if it's retail, but the cities and counties are actively trying to dissolve industrial product, trying to reduce our product, even though we're finding societally we need it more and more and more, creates demand. And then came the funds. The iOS funds are crazy. Somebody told them the secret and they flew over with $1 billion and decided to buy it all up, which is what they're doing right now. And I love the funds. It's great to do deals with them. But it's just an additional dynamic in the space. And okay, so the question was, what's the most valuable part of these truck maintenance facilities that most people are going, wow, I never even thought about that? It's the dirt and it's the zoning. We can't create more land. We can create more properly zoned land, but the city makes that very challenging for us, very close to impossible. So the value is the dirt and the zoning. And sure, the buildings are important, but it's not where you can store 60 semi-trailers, right? That are all taking product from the Amazon warehouse to your door. That's the gold, is the dirt and the heavy zoning that comes along with it.
Well, and I have to say, I don't think you beat around any bush. I think you got right to the point, a smackaroo on what is real, which is cities and counties are not looking at the reality of what is needed for logistical infrastructure. Certainly, we're seeing that with the national story play out across data centers. That's a whole nother world, right? But when you take it out of that world and you just go to like the actual warehousing that we need in order to do that, and you mentioned sales tax, which again hits me because it's like, well, yeah, we'd rather have retail because we get sales tax. Yeah, but who's going to support that retail? Because retail now exists with the arm of e-commerce. I have to just say, because I grew up in professional theater, that was my first job, and my brain started thinking, these cities and counties need to start looking at this like a theater. Like in theater, you have backstage and you have onstage, and they exist together. And backstage ain't pretty. It's not. You're running around and there's tape everywhere and you're good. But backstage is where we get stuff done so that onstage can happen. And so I think you bring a really important point to what's needed. And then I also think that there's a really interesting dynamic and I love this idea of like the funds have come in and are dropping their billions, and they are. The funds are trying to find, and I understand why. We all understand why. They're looking for alpha. They need alpha. They've got to grow that because they have constituents that they have to grow for. So they're in here dropping that. But I think your point is, when we look at this from the Warehouse Hotline perspective, it's what is Denver doing? What is the state and what are the cities doing in order to allow that ecosystem to exist between what's needed with logistics and with other product? Comments, Aviva?
My comment is that what I have learned is that city planners, no offense, hope there's none listening, jerks. No, I'm just kidding.
We love you.
Return my phone call. Just kidding. City planners go to school and they learn city planning. But what's taught in college in city planning is not what is necessary for today. So my perfect example is if you drive around Aurora, Aurora has huge retail centers and huge parking lots. We needed that in the 80s and the 90s. We don't need that anymore. Like, who was doing the city planning? It's the exact same issue that we're seeing today, where people go to school and they're taught old forms of city planning and then they deploy it to today. And a big issue is that a city planner doesn't work as a commercial real estate professional. And a commercial real estate professional is never going to work as a city planner, right? But so there's this like communication issue that you'd think we would have figured out by now, and we haven't. So if you know any way to fix that.
Well, you know what? That's why my whole company exists. Our company, the Smart Agency, we literally exist only to advance commercial real estate and finance through effective communications. And it comes down to problems like these. We do it at the corporate level, but it comes down to building understanding. And I think you do something very similar, Aviva, with what you're doing with your podcast. It's about allowing people to start to understand how this industry works, because it was kept secret for so long. This is moving beyond the kind of the digitization of the real estate, and it's into how we're talking, how we are communicating about what we do, how we are building understanding. And you yourself have built the Warehouse Hotline into a brand that has become wildly successful. You've got more than 1 million followers. You're the #1 Instagram presence in commercial real estate, and you have a top-ranked show with Commercial Real Estate Secrets. And this is what I hear so often. People are like, oh, but I don't need that. But your work is generating real inbound deal flow. So I want to ask you, Aviva, for the women who are going to sit in the room, and it's going to be owners and operators and brokers. And I'm sure that they have heard before, you should be posting, and they don't know where to start. So how do you turn this communication tool, being so present and so active online, how do you turn that into deals? And then what are maybe 2 things that people need to start doing right now today?
I think humans innately have spotlight syndrome. I feel like I post something and everybody sees it. And if I posted something again, they'd be like, oh, that's annoying. But the reality is, if you work in an industry and you're a sales business or client facing or commission facing, you have to stay in front of people in order to be top of mind when that service is needed. Because of that, it is your job as a commission-based salesperson to remind your friends and family what you do. But you don't do it in a salesy way. You do it in a way that you can lead with value. So that's how I built this whole kit and caboodle, was value add content, right? We are creating content that the end viewer wants to consume and gains value from. All of it to say, it's about just starting. And understanding that if you post something, the reality is actually a small percentage of your friends, followers, whatever, are even going to see it, right? We think we post, we think everybody sees it. That's not the reality of these platforms, algorithms. So create posts with value, and sometimes you're going to do great and sometimes you're going to fail, and that's okay because that's life. But the big takeaway in 6 years of creating content in commercial real estate is it's not about going viral. It's about reaching the right people. And that incessant posting year after year after year reminds people. It keeps us top of mind that when they do need someone to sell their warehouse, who else would they call?
I love it. There's such a clarity in how you see business, from how you're tackling your online presence to how it sounds like you work with your clients, which is it's value first. You talked about, look, it's about the numbers. Like, do the numbers work for your business? And then when you come into this content, it's about, hey, how do I really bring something that people want to understand? I'm not trying to sell. I'm trying to help you understand. And I think that there's tremendous value in that. Aviva, as we close into the end of this podcast, I want to look at your personal voice and your leadership. You're carrying forward a business that your grandfather started with just one building in 1984. That has to feel pretty amazing. And then you've reshaped that business for a generation that lives online. And then, frankly, there's already not a lot of women in commercial real estate, but you're in a corner of commercial real estate where there's just not at all a lot of women. So what have you learned from this journey, and what do you want to tell others as you take the stage in July?
Thank you. I could just take you, put you in my pocket, and feel good about myself all day.
My pleasure to be there.
Okay, good. But my big takeaway, and I have to remind myself this, is to stay nimble. My whole advantage was like I started in the business at the right time. And I feel very lucky that I came into the business with the rise of the internet. Something, if you were my father, he didn't get the privilege of that. And he found his own way and he's great and whatever. But technology will continue to evolve. It evolved faster the last 30 years than it did the previous 30 years. So it's human nature that when new technology comes out, we don't want to adapt to it. Right? I'm sure the people who had horse and buggies were terrified of cars. They didn't want to pay for it. I'm sure they were scared. They didn't want to deal with it. And now, look, cars got adopted. It's so much more convenient. You don't see horses and buggies anymore. That's the reality. And if you don't adapt, if you don't stay nimble, you're just going to get left in the dust as technology ramps up. Because, again, we don't decide how society consumes content, consumes product. We just decide how we play into the reality. So just stay curious and open to new technology, because you're totally in trouble if you're not.
Amen. Yet again, a beautiful theme of the interview today, Aviva, is just that adaptability through technology. But also, I would hearken that back to our cities and counties, if anyone happens to be listening, to their ability to adapt and to understand and see what is needed in that. So I support you in that journey. Where, Aviva, can our listeners find you if they'd like to tune in and become part of your audience and learn more about what you do?
Thank you, Jen. This has been really fun, and time just flew by together. So I very much enjoyed chatting. On all social media platforms, you can find me at Aviva Real Estate. Now, if you're a podcast listener, Commercial Real Estate Secrets, follow that. And if you need to sell your warehouse in Colorado, warehousehotline.com.
Fabulous.
Or find me at GlobeSt Women of Influence in July.
Girl, Aviva, you have just nailed it. Yes, and find her at GlobeSt Women of Influence in July. And y'all, if you're not following Aviva, find her at Aviva Real Estate. Aviva, I have so enjoyed this conversation. I knew of you, but now I feel like I know you. I would love to have a conversation with you again. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your energy. So excited to have you on the stage in July. For all of you who are listening, we cannot wait to see you, to network with you, to learn from you and with you in Denver, July 13th and 14th. Get your tickets now. There's a discount code you can use for savings. GlobeSt Women of Influence is the singular national networking, professional development, and team building event in commercial real estate. Companies from all over the world send representatives to this 2-day event to gain deeper insights, make valuable connections, and cultivate new ideas that bring innovation, growth, and deal flow. We look forward to seeing you there.